Okay, so welcome to week 2 of Frogger. So, what we should have right now is that we should at least be able to go up and down. Your guys' job was to have it so that you can go left and right. And so, to summarize, that was under the key listeners here. So, the key pressed, right? And so, you need to go add listeners for A and D keys. And then, of course, you need to invoke the hop method accordingly. What we do also need to do though is what should we do? Open widget. Okay, hold on. I gotta change my bit stream. I don't know how to change the bit stream. Okay. So now what we're gonna do is, as you can see, when I play the display, what we get is as soon as they roll over to the right side, you can see them getting on top of each other. So let's go fix that real quick. And that's going to be in the car class. So the car class kind of determines how the cars reset when they go off the screen on the left side. And so that's going to be under move. So they're, so infinitely we're calling move over and over for these car objects. And then here's the if statement that allows for the rollover. What happens when car exits on the left side? And so I think the screen itself is what, 900 by 900 or something, or 950. And as you can see, this would teleport the cars way too close to the right side. And so what if we just added more distance so that we teleport them a little bit farther to the right of the frame? Let's see what happens then. So now let's see what happens. This guy should go to the right side, and okay, still no overlapping, and it looks like we fixed the overlapping issue. So that should be good. Great. So that's fix number one, is to fix the overlapping issue, and then now we're actually going to go into code organization. And so the issue here is that we're going to have a whole bunch more sprites, and it seems like, Car and Froggy are pretty much the same thing. And so what we're going to do is create a parent class. So we're going to create a parent class called, actually, we're going to create parent class out of the car object. The car class. So I'm going to do a copy paste. And then this is going to be called a sprite. So a sprite is any object on the screen. So that's how we're going to define it. Sprite. Any object seen on the JFrame is a sprite. So we're just defining it for this game, right? Okay, so there it is. So we can still take in that. Okay, good. So really what we need to do now is we have to remove the things that are a little bit different for every single one of these. So one, I'm going to rename my height because I had a typo here. I'm going to right click and then refactor rename. And I'm going to delete that and change that back to height. And so now let's make sure that the getters are good. So set height. So it didn't seem like I'm going to just remove these. So the refactor rename did not fix those issues. So I'm going to go back to source and then we're going to generate getters and setters. From that, I'll just do it for height, generate. And so now we should have them. So the move command for these things should be a little bit different. I don't know how they're going to reset. So I'm going to change. I think I'm going to say that the parent class doesn't define what it means to move. So I'm going to remove it from the parent class. And let's see what else. The images stuff, everything else should be pretty standard and something that the parent class can give to its children. Now the width and height, that's a little bit different, and so maybe I shouldn't do that here. So I'm gonna remove the width and height, and that's going to be set by the child class. You know what? I guess we can have it be set by default, and then we're gonna override that later. So all these things will now be protected because I want to give access to any related class. So I'll just make them all protected. So outside of the class, right, nothing related to it, you still cannot see them. Okay, so there's the frog. So now I'm gonna clean up the car class so that it uses my sprites. So a car is a sprite, so extend sprite. And then anything that is similar, I'm going to change like that. Let's see here. So I no longer need these getters and setters because I'm going to inherit them from the parent. Again, it's to simplify this for us. This stuff also is going to be inherited from the parent class. So it's going to simplify a lot. These things are going to be passed into the constructor. Okay, so I'm just cleaning things up real quick. This stuff no longer needed. This needs to be height. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is call the super constructor, and so we want the parent to kind of set up everything that is typical of a sprite, and then we're gonna do very specific things for the car. So we're gonna go super, and then we are going to pass in the parameters in the order that they are passed in, because we know that the constructor being invoked in the parent class expects them in that order. So again, if we take a look at the sprite class, there is a constructor that takes in a file name start x and start y. And so that's what we're doing in the car class. We're just invoking that constructor. A call to super invokes a parent constructor. We'll do the same thing for this default or this other constructor, super file name. Okay. And then let's just get it going until it is movable. TX, let's see here. Let's make sure that TX is, I think TX was like randomly in the middle, and so we have to just find it. I'm gonna take this guy and put it at the very top and change that to protected. Perfect. So now our car class should be good to go. So the first thing we want to do is double check that it still works, right? So again, at this point, we've simplified the class. I guess the class structure for the sprites that we're going to have. And we should at least be moving the same way. Perfect. So if everything goes well, nothing should be broken. We've just kind of redid some of the code so that it's not so messy. Perfect. So there's that. So now what we need to do is we are going to add a get rectangle. So we're going to need to do a collision eventually. And so what we need to do is we're going to have the sprites return a rectangle representation of itself so that we can use that later for collision. So under sprite, we're going to add something called get rectangle. Public rectangle get rectangle. What the heck? And then of course you're probably going to need to import the rectangle class. So we are just going to create a rectangle object out of the location and the size of our sprite. So this would be x, y, with height. And then we're going to return this. So again, every single sprite object is going to keep track of its own x, y with height, and so that object is going to return a rectangle representation of itself. Great. Okay, so again, we just redid the structure of the class. We added a helper function. Helper function to helper function for collision detection later. Now our froggy also needs to do the same thing. The frog needs to extend the sprite class, and so you guys have to go ahead and do that yourself. So transform the froggy class such that it extends the sprite class. Anything that is repeated in this child class that should be inherited should be removed from this class. It's exactly the same way that I removed anything that was copied over from the oh wait, this is an old file. So right, essentially anything that should be inherited from the parent is going to be erased from here because that now exists in the sprite class. So there you go. That is your first task on your own. Convert Froggy, the Froggy.java class file, such that it inherits from the sprite class. Okay, so that's that. And then now I want to go over, let's see, what else can we do? I think we should, this week we should add in a third row. So we're going to add one row together, and then I'm going to expect you to add another row. I'm going to go ahead and add a log over here or something. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add additional rows of obstacles or the sprites. And so here we've got car. I'm going to create a brand new object, a brand new class called log, and it's going to be pretty much a car. So I'm going to copy car and paste it, and I'm going to change it to log. So log will behave similar to a car, right? And it's also going to expand sprite. And then since my log might be different size, my movement might be a little different here. The car, did we change this? Weird. Let's make sure I don't have any overlapping here. I'm going to go back real quick to the sprite class to make sure we remove any call to move, because it should not be doing any moving. Okay, good. Alright, so for the log itself, we're going to go ahead and just assume that the file name is implied, and so it's going to be log pick. You know what? To make it easier, let's not do that. But I will have an array list of them. Array list containing log objects. How many should we have? So maybe like 12? I don't know. Array list of log objects. Logs equals new array list of log objects. This is, why is it not wanting to import array list? I have a class called log. What are you doing? The question is, are we in the right driver? Oh, that's awkward. I don't know where that driver is from, but it wasn't the right driver. Okay, I was in the wrong file for one. I think I just had two copies or something. Okay. Log array list. Array list of log. Logs is equal to new array list. Ooh, typing is a struggle today. Alright, so remember that's just a data structure that's empty. So we've went ahead and created it, however, it contains 0 objects. The driver constructor is where we're setting up all of these things. Sorry for all the pops on my mic, I don't have a pop filter. Okay, so set up the logs. So we're gonna just add, I don't know, 12 of them. And so we're going to go, each time we're going to create a log object. Log temp is equal to new log. The name of the picture is logpic.png. And then the x and y. So for now, I'm going to use the same math as the car one. But I do know it needs to be closer to the water. So I want to make sure it's in the water part of my image. I think am I already using temp? Oh, sorry, that's not an error. And then finally, we're going to add this to our array list. Okay, so now we set up the log objects, but they're not visible yet. And that's going to be under paint. So you set up the objects, but then the actual program itself need to invoke the paint method of those objects. This time around, I'm going to use an enhanced for loop. Like that. So now when I click play, we should see the logs in that row. Okay. So maybe I don't want it to be at, I mean, clearly it needs to go up a little bit. So we're going to change that by 100 pixels. And then I'm going to remove that 350 requirement here. So that's going to go under here. I don't think I need that. And then I'm going to try 100. Okay, click play. Cool. So for the logs, I think the logs, they vary in how they're placed. Yeah. So sometimes they are maybe, I don't know, a clump of 3, and sometimes they're a clump of 2. So how do we do that? I think the spacing is way too much is what I'm saying. Let's see here. Int spacing is equal to 0. Well, actually, it should be the size of the actual log itself. And so let's see what happens if it's just based on the spacing of the logs. I guess I have to double check the width of those logs. So if we don't have any spacing, right, then we know that they're just going to be side by side because the actual spacing is 50. But if they're 50 each, then this log starts here, the next one starts at 50, the next one starts at 100, etc. What I want to do is kind of have a way so that every now and again, maybe every third, the spacing is a little different. And so we're going to go if I mod 3 is equal to 0, spacing equals 100, else spacing is equal to 50. So let's try that. It should be a group of 3 now. Now we've got a group of 3 and then 5 and then 3, which is actually fine. What if it was 2? I think I like this better. But we just wanted to vary where those logs are. So now the question is, why are the logs themselves not moving? And so we're gonna go back to log and go to move. I think the VX for them is not set. And so what we want to do is we want to set, well, yeah, it should be moving. TX that's set to translation. Change this to some bigger number and see if that works for us. If we do this though, let's see what happens. Okay, so we have an issue with the log class, or they are not moving, even though we have an X and Y here. So we're gonna have to go to car and make sure that the car can be affected by this. So will this change the speed of the car objects? So that doesn't change the speed of the cars, which means that VX is really not being used properly here. And so we're gonna go back to the sprite class real quick and see what's happening there. Oh, you know what? We're not invoking move, are we? So we gotta go back to driver. And under the paint class, let's make sure we're calling the right moving. So all we're doing here is painting. We also have to update and call the move, right? So that's going to be under update. I guess we didn't put them in the same spot, so that's okay. So here, I'm going to go back and reset everything from my log because I think I gave them weird values. So velocity stays at -1. This should be Vx. Okay. And then this is probably going to need to be 1,000. Otherwise, it's going to have an issue with that overlapping. Again, I was in different projects for some reason, and so it wasn't working. So we're going to do the same thing for log L, for all the logs in logs. That's really what that's saying. And then we're going to invoke move. And so from that point on, we should have some sort of movement. Perfect. Okay, so now I want you guys to add a new row over here of logs. Or well, you can either add a new row of logs or a row of, let's see, a row of trucks. I don't know. Whatever you were able to find. So you should do that. And then we should probably start setting up. Ooh, what happened to my frog there, buddy? Key release froggy. Okay. I think my froggy's broke then. Oh no, my froggy broke. Okay. So I don't think your froggy broke. My froggy broke. So I'm going to change. I want to make sure everything is reset back to normal here. So that's the same. The car one, we want to make sure this is set to 1. Nothing crazy there. Why does it keep going on this screen every time I click play? That's so silly. Okay, so this code doesn't have up and down, I think. Again, I was in 2 different projects, I think. So this one doesn't actually go down. So that's not good. Okay, so for yours, you should have hopping. And for this, again, I have 2 different projects. So good news, we're not really working with the frog right now. So you shouldn't have that issue on yours. I just have to kind of consolidate the two projects that I had open for some reason. Okay, and then the other thing is we have to start thinking about collision. Um, so I think for week 2, since I mean this is essentially, yeah, you know what? I think you guys, in order to get about 3 hours worth of work, I think what you need to do is have your trucks going. You should have another set of logs here, and then another set of cars. So logs, trucks, and then another set of cars. And then try to get a different sprite for the different car. Try to get different spacing going. And then, of course, you should be reorganizing the code such that you're now using the sprite class. So that's going to be week 2. For next week, we're going to think about how we should be able to ride the logs when we hop on them. Well, I guess we should probably have 2 rows of logs here. So we're going to need a lot of logs here so that we can actually ride them. So add another row here, add another 2 rows of logs here, trucks here, and then cars. That should be about 3 hours worth. And that's just going to be a whole bunch of these things, right? Remember? It's just going to be adding more here. So logs 1, and then you're going to have logs 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. Okay. And so that should, again, if you want to add more, you will have another one here, etc. If you want to call them log row 0, row 1, etc., do that. Have more cars instead of log. You should have a car class. You should have a truck class. So I should see a truck class here. If you want to add a brand new car class that's more specific, like a mini or something, I don't know, you should have that too. And that should be about what you need to change for week 2. Okay, I think I'm going to end the stream. Goodbye. And end stream. Yes.